You're listening to Making a Living Show. I'm Roby Levy.
I'm Matthew Dayler, and I paint murals for a living, and I am faculty at the Art Academy of Cincinnati.
Before talking with Matthew Dayler, my knowledge of Cincinnati consisted of 4 letters, WKRP. Turns out it's home to a thriving art scene, a respected arts college, and Matthew's company, Chroma Projects, which makes large-scale murals and installations. Cincinnati is also considered the capital of the beanbag tossing game, cornhole, which isn't relevant, but I thought was pretty funny. Here's my chat with Matthew Dayler. Who are you and what do you make for a living?
Hey, well, I'm Matthew Dayler, and I was born and raised in Hamilton, Ontario. Went to Westdale High School. It's kind of where we sort of met, even though we knew each other before that. And I'm a college professor at the Art Academy of Cincinnati, where I run the print media program. So printmaking of all shapes and sizes, screen printing, lithography, and etching, as well as contemporary means, digital printmaking, and any other way that students can figure out how to make a print. And then I own a mural company, and I produce interior and exterior murals for small clients all the way up to large corporations.
All right, I'm going to roll this all the way back here because you've got a lot on the go, and I'm not even sure I know what a print actually is.
So like screen prints, like, we're wearing a print on a t-shirt. Most things have a sort of print. So basically ink transferring to paper in some sort of way, and it can be done in a photographic way, or it can be done like a woodcut or linoleum or copper or zinc plates. There's just so many different ways that prints can be made. You can ink up yourself and make a print. So like there's like really an endless means to how a print can be done.
Well, and prints are made usually by layering colors on top of each other, right?
For sure, yeah. They can be one color or layers, and it's a process-based thing, So like you have an image, and then you like create that thing over a bunch of steps. So that's kind of what got me into printmaking, was like I'm into making things that have a bunch of steps, I guess, as opposed to like have blank canvas, figure out what to do with it. But it's like, no, you figure out, I have this image, and now I want to create 100 of them.
So you and I met in high school. We were in a theater group, and we played all over Hamilton, and
we went to the first Dead show together. It started to steamroll the rest of my life.
So we met all that time ago, and back then I remember you certainly were sketching, you were painting. And then you got, as we got through high school and got to closer to the end, you were doing large scale murals, but painting. You weren't doing prints.
Set design stuff. Like that was more of like where it came from. Like really with your brother,
you were both doing
designing things. Yeah, we were designing things, and we were like, and because of my dad having that theater outlet, there was always giant canvases of like, let's do something for this show or whatever. Like even so high school backdrops and stuff and whatever. So those were some of the first things that I kind of got interested in. And then my dad was also taking kids to New York, on theater trips and stuff. And even before I was in high school, I got to kind of do those things. So seeing like graffiti in New York in the early 80s and stuff like that was like, I was like, what is this? But like realizing how impactful, without necessarily doing graffiti, but impactful of like giant color outside, on walls or trains or wherever. And I was always just like, wow, like, let's do the theater way. Like let's paint a mural at school instead of outside or whatever. I don't know, those were just kind of like, looking back, those were like the things that influenced me, I think, the most, was like the theater, the production of it, and then like these minuscule little trips that without me thinking about murals were like about that.
That's where you got your first taste of it, was on these trips.
My first taste of like color outlines, these are all things that are based in print, and layering of print. I paint like a print as well, like I layer color and so on and so forth. So
you've always done it that way? That's how you started?
I always have done it that way too. And it's kind of funny because a lot of my friends that are like real academic painters are always like, look at me sideways because of the way I like sort of construct something. But like that's just my way of doing it. It's not necessarily this other way of doing it.
But how did you develop that? Because I'm imagining the first time you saw a great big painting on wall, big bold colors, and obviously some sort of message, abstract or otherwise, coming across. I'm assuming you grab a paintbrush and you start slapping paint on a wall is your first thing. No,
I totally didn't at all. In fact, I did it backwards. I drew with a pencil
on the wall.
Yeah, I know it was super weird. So I was making these like, so in print, my prints are made up of like a series of dots, right? Like, and so I would like do all these. I would make drawings in graduate school. I made all these pen and ink drawings that looked like prints. They were just like stippling, if you will call it, lack of a better word, just like little marks. And then like in undergraduate, I would do those little marks on a metal plate and then ink it up. So it was just like this mark making. And then in my studio, I was like, oh, someone said, oh, you can draw this on this wall here. And I was like, well, what am I going to draw it with? Like, so I took a pencil and I did little marks on the wall. And then I was like, oh, this is cool. And so then I started doing like self portraits in pencil on the wall.
Life size, small? Like what's the scale of
Like, yeah,
these?
life size, like literally as if I was there, standing there. And then I started adding like colored shapes to these things. And those colored shapes were like painted. So I'd like draw with a pencil and then I would paint a shape. And then that's like really where it's sort of snowballed from there. And then like literally a theater. This is how I started painting murals. So I was like doing the pencil drawings on the wall in galleries because I was all thinking like I thought like that's how you made art, was like you made it in a gallery and in a museum. Like those were my only goals. Like I didn't think about community-based projects or anything at that point. I was just being that snooty like my art goes in a museum, which is a load of shit really if you think about it. But this theater next door to the school I teach at was like, hey, we want to do a mural on this wall. Um, why don't you do it? And I was like, well, I don't know how to paint a big mural. And it was like literally the side of the building. And so I was all like, I don't know. And I was hanging out with all these like artist dudes, friends, and they were like, oh, you should meet my friend so and so and so and so. And they were like graffiti writers. And I was like, cool. So like I met these two graffiti writers, local graffiti writers, and befriended them. And I was like, hey, like, do you guys want to help me paint this mural? And they were like, fuck yeah, of course. They were all down to paint big, and I was all like painting small. So we all came together and like put this design together and painted this mural. And like literally that's kind of like started the business. Like I started working with these other dudes who we've now all gone off and done separate things and now all have our own businesses. But like we all kind of started together. They were painting graffiti and I was doing printmaking. And I was just like networking really hard, like in the art game. So that sort of began the beginning of like collecting opportunities. We painted a giant wall outside and people were like, what's that? And then we're just like, hey, come and do my wall, come and do this. Or like, and so then that theater, we repeated painting that wall over and over and over again for the next 10 years.
Every year a new project.
Every year we would paint over it and do it again. And so it became this thing that just like built momentum. And then in between painting those giant murals, we would go off and do smaller projects that people would, come at us for painting this big one.
Right. So maybe for their businesses or for their
Literally
endeavors,
yeah.
their messages. Yeah.
Totally. And like really not what I had planned. Like I hadn't planned to paint murals.
Well, what had you planned on doing? What was
Being a gallery artist, like teaching college, being a college professor, and working in my studio, like, just like that. My visions of what I wanted to be as an artist was like that, like your science professor that just works in the research lab and develops the cures for everything. And that's all they do their whole life. They grow giant eyebrows and they learn all this. They just nerd right out. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to be this college professor and I teach at this school and I have access to any equipment that I want to use. And I'm just going to make art and show it in galleries and museums. But dude, the broke is a joke. Like college professors don't get paid, like you get paid, barely a living wage.
Are you a full-time professor?
I am a full-time faculty member. It took me a hot minute to navigate that world. I was like a full-time adjunct is what they kind of call it. So like you're basically teaching a full course load, but for adjunct pay. It's actually very illegal in
Lovely.
the US
Yeah.
now, but just in terms of like that, because you don't get benefits when you're at that stage. So you're like literally teaching full-time that amount of course load, but you're not getting benefits. So but now I am full-time. I run the program. So it is better, of course. We don't have things like tenure, which sometimes they do in, larger universities, which really doesn't exist. So there I was just like, yeah, I'm going to be a gallery artist and failing at it. like
Failing at it because why? Because the type of art you were doing was not going to find its way into gallery? Because you've shown in galleries.
both. Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, totally. I've shown in galleries in a bunch of different places, but I think like that world is just it's so insular and somewhat fictitious on the outside. It's like the NBA. It's like it looks appealing when you're in high school, like, yo, I'm going to make the NBA. But then when you realize the odds of actually making it into the NBA, it's like literally no different than the odds of like making it in the gallery art world. Like it's who where you're positioned, like what you're doing, and all those types of things. And like here I am, like eating Snickers, broke as a joke, making self portraits in Cincinnati, Ohio, wishing to show in New York and Berlin and those types of places. Like it just the disconnect was
Was pretty large,
like
yeah.
yeah, and like even though there was the internet and like whatever else, like I just I encourage my students, if anything, to like you want to go do those things, like go to those places. Like you're into anime, like great, like what are you doing in the Midwest? Like go where those things exist, yeah, or whatever. And so like murals exist everywhere, and my teaching existed here, and Cincinnati's like really thriving in terms of like bringing in urban other artists to create murals in Cincinnati. They have a huge mural program that I actually wasn't involved with, but like worked parallel with. So there was just tons of resources. So yeah, like I was that shifted gears, and then it became where I was like, I don't have time to be in my studio doing this like sort of self-reflective work about the world outside. I was like approached by restaurants and whatever to paint murals, and so I was like taking my art, philosophy and applying it to painting murals, I guess.
Is that what Chroma Projects is?
100%. That's what Chroma Projects. Yeah.
That's the commercial side of your art business.
Yeah, that is the art these days. Even though I do maintain that personal Matthew Dayler website, most of those things are sort of sides. I don't want to. I don't want to.
They're personal explorations more so than.
Yeah, like painting the deadheads and putting them out on the street. Like that's just like a thing I like to do when I'm on tour. Like I'll take my friends and do a wee pace and like run around at night, and go and put them up and like pretend, on that sort of like renegade tip or whatever. But or like someone asked me to do an interesting project that's maybe not so commercially focused, but I've really kind of lumped some of that stuff into Chroma projects. Like any of those things I did with like Bunk News and things like that, those were like gallery settings. I think more now with like the evolution of Chroma projects that it is the art, it is the design, it's all of it. But I collaborate with other people, and so like those projects are like it's bigger than just me.
So who are the kinds of people that you are collaborating with when you're making one of these? Like how is one of these projects coming into being?
So they can come from various angles. Like I work with a number of architecture firms, or design houses, or experiential marketing firms. This firm I work real closely with here in Cincinnati called Agar, they do all kinds of different marketing strategies or events, and they've sort of like enabled me to do cool things. Like they have an event, they're like, oh, let's get him to paint live, or design some product that gets to be given away, or do a print, to all the way to they're outfitting an office for a client, and this is perfect, like he can come in and paint this mural, office. So just so many different outlets. I don't know, like I think with the rise in popularity of things like graffiti and street art, which I keep very separate, the type of thing that I do is more wanted. And I think if you can do it professionally and sort of separate yourself from the rest, then I think more people want it. I've been really lucky.
Separate yourself in what way though? Like separate yourself, in other words, from competition, or separate yourself from the art of it?
Both. Like separating yourself from the art of it and not like getting your feelings hurt when the client isn't into what you produce for them in the design stage, because like that's just not what they want. That doesn't mean they don't like you or they don't like your art.
Yeah, you hear this all the time. You need to have a thick skin when you're working with clients and
For
commissions.
sure. For sure.
And just because they don't like idea A doesn't mean they don't like your body of work, or for that matter, as you're saying, yourself.
Right. Like they reached out to you for a reason. For me, it's like all about relationships, right? Like when you build those relationships with people, they'll come back to you for those things, And so I just like, I started not getting hung up on like, well, this is has to look like this, or it has to be like this. Like, as much as I can push it, I'll push it. And until like, if they want to, if the client wants to like rein it in more towards them, like, cool, like they're paying for it.
Well, that's part of the conversation. You're still collaborating with your client.
Oh, 100%. And like, a lot of times they're like, yeah, I want you to just do whatever you want to do. And I'm like, well, what is that? Like, what do I want to do? I want to paint a mural, but I want to paint a mural that's going to like work for your space. Like, you don't just be like have a gym and be like, paint whatever you want. I'm like, well, paint a bunch of fat people on your wall. Like, you're going to be stoked, you know? Like,
So tell me, where are these ideas coming from? Is there usually a guiding light to any of these projects?
yes, there's always a guiding light. I mean, aesthetically, I'm into certain things. I like to paint people. I like bright colors. I like interesting graphic design. I love print textures. So those are like components of things that I'm interested in. When I say print textures, like mechanical things like halftone dots or like, you know, things like that. Those are the things I'm interested in, you know, like as an artist, you know, I love, if you want to talk about like type of people, well, like I love Renaissance paintings, you know, but I don't necessarily want my art to look like that, but I love that type of thing, you know? So I think I have like a toolkit and I can pull from that toolkit. And if I don't have those tools, that's where the collaboration comes in.
In terms of other artists coming on board?
Sure, yeah. Like this client wants, like, they want it to be illustrated. Well, I don't illustrate. Like, I don't, you know, like draw characters or something, you know, but like I have a pool of people that I know that can do that and do it awesome. So then I'll like bring them aboard.
How do you work with them? Do you direct where you give them
Definitely, it's definitely in an art directed way, and so that's sort of how I like try to maintain some level of quality control for myself, or like to make sure that the product that I put out there has a standard, so that people know, they're like, well, that's sick. Who did that? And they're like, oh, you know, Chroma Projects did that, and they're like, oh, that makes sense. Or, you know, we've worked with these people before, so like check them out or whatever, as opposed to the quality variations, you know, that can sort of happen.
right? You don't just farm out the piece. This is still has your
It for sure,
stamp of approval
even
on it.
if I don't even touch it in with like a brush, um, there's steps that you have to get to that point to do that. And so like I want to put the right players together that are going to get those steps accomplished, right? Of course, I always want to paint, but there's just sometimes when it just doesn't work out.
So mostly you're operating then as a single person, as you, as the artist, as the lead, and then you're bringing on people as need be per project, and you may even outsource at different times, but you still have your hands in the pie. You're
For
still there.
sure, for sure. Yeah, like this recent project that I just finished doing was huge. Like, this office wanted vinyl wall coverings, they wanted murals, but the graphic language or the design language was all the same across the board. So like I worked with my friends who own a design firm and screen printing company, who are just like my go-to dudes at Powerhouse Factories in Newport, Kentucky. And so like we worked collaboratively on the design, coming up with the language. Like, we hired an illustrator. So it's like all those components put together in the pot created the graphics for this entire facility, that then I facilitate the installation of that stuff. So
So what's the toughest thing about working with clients this way, with partners and collaborators this way? What's hard about this?
juggling all the chefs in the kitchen.
Is it personalities? Is it ideas? Is it a bit of both?
I think it's ideas, but I try to choose people that we have a common goal for, like making really, you know, interesting dope shit that challenges us as well. So like I try to set it up to work with people that like we're not going to give up on it. You know, we're going to work it out. Like, in working with these powerhouse dudes on this project, like we did a whole design phase that they were just like, you know, and then we like had to go back to the drawing board. Like, I don't want a team that's just going to be like, oh, you know, bummer, and kind of give up on that. You know, like I knew like we were going to see it through no matter what. Like, just because, you know, we want to dot the i's and cross the t's, you know, make it right. I don't know. I just know so many artists, and you just know who clicks and who's going to work right. And then, and that with that way, through collaborating, you're not like, it can get old if you work with the same people all the time. And this way, it's like my responsibility to choose who I want to bring in and work with. And if that doesn't work, well, that's on me. You know,
Right,
because
as the
like,
curator of the
yeah,
people
yeah,
who
yeah.
are
Like if it
there.
doesn't work, it goes back to me, and it's up to me to figure it out.
So how do you go about getting clients? How do you market yourself?
Well, like I said, man, it's really weird. Like that theater mural, like really started a crazy snowball of things. And I know that's like 10 years ago, but I don't necessarily like beat down the email trail or start pounding on people's doors. Like I've been lucky enough that like one has led to another, and I've also had some like really consistent clients that have stayed with me to kind of be like the bread and butter. So um, I do a lot of school painting, like painting inside of academic institutions, like
With
classrooms.
students?
No, no. Like when it comes to the painting, I try to only use like painters, people that know how to do it, as opposed to it being a learning experience of like, hey, I'm gonna bring you on. We're gonna like paint this orange, paint this red, like do that kind of thing. Which there is companies that do that, and I just like would rather let them stick to that.
Right, you leave your
That's not
teaching to
my
your teaching, and you
yeah.
leave your
That's not
work
like
your work.
the ethos of what I'm trying to do. Like I don't want to paint something for 8 weeks and be a teacher. I want to paint like something in 8 weeks and make it sick and you know get paid and like move on and like not have the hangups. Like I want to enjoy it, like because I love doing it. I don't. I'm not saying I don't love teaching or like working with the kids. I just try to keep that stuff separate. So yeah, it literally was a snowball. So like painting those murals outside got a school board really interested in us painting some themed classrooms. We painted like 5 themed classrooms in a summer, and that's carried on to this day.
So the school boards are having you back, or you're getting more and more school boards on board?
Both. So like school boards have invited me back. One of my clients like was in one school district and moved to another, and then they brought me along, so that like split me into two. And now I'm like working with like architecture firms that build schools. So I've painted enough within schools that other things have taken notice, or teachers move, and in academics people move around. You have the people that stay there like 30, 40 years, but like then you also have the principals that are trying to move up in the world and become superintendents or whatever. And so they just reach back out. Um, like literally over 100 spaces in schools over the last 10 years.
So why is it schools are commissioning this type of art?
Because in America, we're all about like STEM or STEAM, science, technology, engineering, math for STEM, and then some throw in the A for STEAM and make it, throw in the art. So they're all about sort of engaging learning through music and art as a way of, keeping kids interested, right? Like schools look like jails, man. They're like concrete cinder block walls, no windows, usually painted super shitty, like drab colors, or horrible, like bright school colors, like the fucking hallways, like yellow with beige tiles, and you're just like, God, like what is this? It looks horrible, just institutional. And then like I don't know, you go into a classroom and paint some like Dr. Seuss, or you paint some scenery, or turn it into a science classroom into a jungle, or paint Einstein here, or just like real teaching moments, quotes, things like that. Like, yeah, some of these schools down here have like had really amazing graduates that have went to them or whatever, and that's where it's like I just love my research. Like, I've painted Einstein probably like 10 times. I've painted Martin Luther King like 10 times. Like, but I love that. I love that. I'll paint him 10 more times. If it means that kids are going to look at it and learn from it.
If you've painted Martin Luther King multiple times or Einstein multiple times, what are you doing different? Is every project different? How are you finding a way to keep those interesting?
I mean, I just try to mix it up. Like I'm influenced all the time and change it up, and like I'll work with that teacher. Like, what are they interested in? Like when it's different, like I might paint them blue and tones of blue in one room because that teacher wants like the fitting for that room is that, oh, I'm going to paint it like blue and purple, and so like everything in that room is blue and purple. Or I'm going to paint him grayscale and black and white here, or I'm going to colorize him here and paint him brown, like use skin tones and whatever else. So yeah, you just switch it up. Like if I do it again, I usually try to do it somewhat differently. put an outline around it, or just graphically, I don't know. And that's the part of the collaboration is like when I do the classroom things or the academic spaces, usually the teachers, the principals, the superintendents, the administration, like have some kind of buy-in, like these are the themes we're interested in, or these are the books that we teach. This is the curriculum in this classroom. And so then it's up to me to just kind of like, I don't know, take those things and make it interesting.
As a career, as a body of work, what are you hoping to achieve? What are you hoping to convey?
I'm trying to achieve a level of sustainability so that I can keep doing it. I want to be that 70-year-old man that's rolling up on mural sites and like talking to the young bucks that are painting cool projects. So sustainability, that's like my worry, is because, things are so fleeting in the art world, especially now. Like we watch how things just evaporated for everybody in the art world. Um, but somehow things did shine through and opportunities have shined through for people in this time. So, just being mindful of that. Like, so that's what I want to achieve.
You said, things dried up, but certain things, opportunities kind of came from that. How have you seen what you do change in order to respond to those opportunities?
Well, the things that I do, murals have always been a form of messaging. And I think messaging right now is super important. And whether that's through signs, whether that's through banners, whether that's through painting boarded up windows, painting messages on the street, what have you, like there's so much art in the art of protest, or in, like even in signage right now, like stay 6 feet apart, stay here, like the graphic design of it all, like there's just so many things that need to change that are in a graphic way that we have to navigate. So yeah, I think it's changed because the messaging is different. I hope that the opportunity for, like, say artists or groups that say didn't quite have the opportunities exposed to them now do, or potentially can have those opportunities. So yeah, that's how I think things have changed. But for me, I've seen both sides of it because like things went away, but then things also stayed. So like this is just trials of the world. Like larger corporations, those things stayed. Whereas like the smaller mom and pop jobs have been like, yo, wait, I gotta hold up on this. Like I think pre-COVID and pre sort of civil unrest here in America, like it was the expendable economy was there because everybody was busy, everybody was going out. Like in Cincinnati, like all kinds of restaurants were opening. They want to do cool painted interiors. Like the whole gentrification of neighborhoods allowed us to paint all kinds of stuff. Like all the guys that were painting graffiti outside are now painting murals inside these places. So there's just lots of opportunities for lots of different people to be doing lots of different things. And then COVID came, and so then like all of those places, now shut down. Nobody can go inside the restaurant and see these things, so it's all takeout, whatever. So that sort of market kind of slowed. Whereas like if you were doing jobs in like a big corporation, like I was painting on that job I was talking about was on in a in a larger company, and we started right before COVID, like 2 weeks before they shut everything down. So we painted for 2 weeks, got a portion finished, we shut ourselves down, but they kept going. So like it wasn't like I could have kept going in there, but like I was like, do I want to go to a construction site every day with a bunch of dudes? And like we didn't know anything, like masks weren't, like we just didn't know anything. So
Yeah, it was too early to know.
but I could have continued, so there's that where there was like people that couldn't continue and there's people that can't continue. So I just like feel blessed that like the opportunities were just there no matter what. And now I think like now that we know that we have to navigate the world in a different way, I think those opportunities will start to come back for a lot of people. Like the boards are still up downtown, and the murals are going to stay on the street, and hopefully that will just grow the attention too.
Do you think you're going to have to hit the email pavement and do a little extra promotion to be at the front of people's minds when these opportunities do arise?
I don't know. Yeah, I'm never. I don't want to say like I don't. I always like, again, for me it's all about relationships, right? So if I'm like building relationships, and whether there's work or not, in those relationships, like I'm still connecting and we're still like, you know, talking about potential opportunities, or like when an opportunity comes across their plate, like I want those people to think of me, based on what we've done prior. So that's, setting it up for those things.
So what does a typical day look like for you?
Pre-COVID or
Well, let's go with the new normal.
the new normal? Yeah. So the new normal is I get up. I don't sleep very well. um, So I'm a 5:30, 6 a.m. kind of riser. I love that time in the morning. That's just like my time where I'm like focusing on my emails, drinking coffee, just like kind of outlining the things I do on the daily. Um, then generally I had class online. I love morning classes. So I teach 8:30 to like 11:20 or something like that, like 5 days a week. Sometimes I have an afternoon class. That was my schedule in the past spring. So I had 8:30 class, and would interact with students and engage with them. And then I would like go back to checking the emails that I sent in the morning, maybe doing some research on projects, maybe doing some design time at that point, depending on what projects are going on, invoicing, paperwork, all those types of things. So like, because as running the business, I'm looking for jobs, I'm doing the paperwork, I'm you know, ordering supplies, doing whatever happens to be going on. And then I could potentially be painting
On a project or
on
on
a
a
project.
personal.
Yeah. So like if it's a project week, then chances are by 2 p.m. I'm generally on a paint site. And if it's a non-paint week, that time would be design time.
So I'm going to ask you something that I know pisses off a lot of artists, but I have to ask just because the type of work you're doing is so large scale and so varied. So I'm going to ask you, like, what is the kind of scope of these projects in terms of timing? How long does it take to get a project to the point of paint to wall, let's
Paint
say,
to wall.
and then from paint to wall to finish? Like, how what are we
Yeah.
looking at here?
The spectrum is massive. So generally with larger corporations, 6 months,
Wow.
4 to 6 months from conception to design to getting it even on the wall. Some of the smaller jobs, like I just got off the phone with someone prior to you that was wanting to talk about something, and like they're like in the next 4 weeks, and you're like, okay, like maybe that's doable. Um, I mean, if I didn't have anything going on, I'd be like, yeah, totally. But I mean, I have some other projects that I'm in the midst of, and so on and so forth. So then,
So how do you divide your time? I mean, is it sort of a first come first serve kind of a thing? Is it like I've got these two projects
yeah,
up, I can take a third, but it's going to have to work around these other two? And
it all depends on just like the calendar. Like if I'm scheduled to paint for 3 weeks at this big huge job, like clearly the prep and stuff for that big job is gonna take up a lot of time. So, for example, I just came off of a 2 week job. We finished Friday, so we painted 2 weeks. So I'm off this week again, navigating clients, invoicing, doing design, going to meetings for other jobs that are scheduled or planned. And then next week I'm out painting like Wednesday to Sunday.
now, would you ever consider? I mean, you've said that you at times you bring on people to shore up types of work that you may not be proficient at or be an expert at, but they contribute to your project, they collaborate. Would you ever consider taking a whole step back from doing any of the actual work and actually just run this as sheer business and rep?
It's funny, you're not the only one that's like asked me that. Like literally, like Chroma Projects has had a couple different names and iterations up to this point, and any of the people that I've kind of worked with up to this point had the same kind of questions. It was like, why don't you just like stay at home and like just be a manager and whatever else? And I'm always like, but dude, I'm an artist, like deep down, I'm a maker of things, right? That's what this is all about, dude. Like I make shit and I want to get dirty and I want to paint the wall, and I don't want to sit at home behind my computer all the time. I need that sort of variation in my life. And that's like the thing that I need, right? Like without that, I don't really want to do it. Sit at home and collect a paycheck and be that asshole that I hate. But I mean, whatever. That's still like the little grain of punk in me, you know. But like, I just, I don't know. I want to make stuff, you know. Like the teachers I hated most or did the least for me were the teachers that weren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, you know. And so me as a teacher and me as like someone out in the world, like I can't teach what I'm not doing or, you know, what I'm not thinking about. So like if I'm trying to teach people to be a professional artist out in the world, like I sure as hell better be one.
So what kind of advice would you give to somebody who wants to get into making murals and get into art?
Again, like do it. Like get out there and make them. Even I painted tons of free murals, and I'm not saying go paint free murals, but I can point to so many examples along the way of things that I would just do because I was like, this is awesome. I'm gonna paint it. You know, my partner would be like, are you getting paid for that? And I'd be like, a little bit, and they'd be like, oh. And I'm like, but you don't understand. Like, I gotta go paint this right now. Like, there was a point in time when we were like, before everybody started really doing this, we're painting like headlines or news headlines or something. It was kind of weird. So, like, the Cincinnati Bengals, like Chad Johnson came to Cincinnati, and there was like all this things. So, like, we went out that night and we painted Chad Johnson all big on our wall. So that the next morning, people woke up and would call the news and be like, "Yeah, we painted this thing." Or like when Steve Jobs died, we like went out and painted a Steve Jobs mural like that night, you know. And like people woke up the next morning, it's just like little rogue renegade things to just be put on people's radar. And then when they're like, you know, we've done some community projects. Like we painted 12 city blocks on the ground, and that was a long, like literally like 8 years ago. And it was like 1,500 people. And we were just like a part of this. Like my collaborator at the time was like, he drew it all out on the road. We had teams filling it and like whatever else. And like those things snowball. Like later on, we ended up doing another, like, have you ever painted the ground before? We're like, yeah, those guys did, you know, like it just sort of like it just sort of grows. And like I said, like Cincinnati like had a lot of opportunities just kind of come of it through its growth over the last 10 years. Where I feel like just right time and right place, like been around a lot of people that are trying to do cool stuff.
So where can people find out more about you?
So you can find me on my website, which is chromaprojects.com, chroma with a dash and then projects.com. The Instagram, which is at chromaprojects, which is all one word there. You know, I have my own personal website, MatthewDayler.com. So Art Academy of Cincinnati is where I'm faculty, so you can look me up at all of those places. I'm pretty Googleable. So anyway, yeah, that's where I can be found.
Thank you so much for being on the show, Matt, and sharing with us how you make a living.
Yeah, dude, I appreciate it. I want to get up to Canada and paint some murals.
Subscribe to Making a Living Show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and pretty much anywhere else you get your podcasts. For more on the show, visit makingalivingshow.com or follow along on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube at Making a Living 1. Making a Living Show is produced by Next Exit Media and hosted by me, Roby Levy. Thanks for listening.